Hey everyone, I'm Jeff. This is Jeff Need Sports. That's Bo Murphy from Up in Flames, and this is NCAA football week 2 reaction. Finally. Hey, what's up, everybody? What's up, Mo?
What's going on, Jeff?
Pretty wild week of football, man. We did the Buckeye remix earlier. Everybody can go listen to that. Our day was a little more relaxed than several other teams around the country. It was
Mhm.
as far as college football goes, it was a pretty wild day. I enjoyed it. It went deep into the night. Woke up at 1 in the morning and BYU and who'd BYU beat last night?
Taylor.
Yeah, BYU and Baylor in overtime. I wake up in overtime. I'm like, what is happening? So that was fun. So overall, great week. So we'll get it kicked off here, man. What's your best wins of the week?
Obviously the game that you and me both were looking forward to watching. I watched it. Great game. Tennessee. I think Tennessee beating Pitt. I think, and it'll lead into probably what we'll get into in a little bit, but Tennessee beating Pitt in the same week that the Florida Gators lost to Kentucky. I think that was a big indictment for Tennessee. I think they look really good. I don't think they're a playoff contender or anything, but I think they're a really good team who has to play. They play Alabama or they play Georgia. Like, that's a tough out. I think they could beat Florida as well. So, and they're everything we projected them to be this year. Like, they're very well rounded offensively. Their quarterback, Hendon Hooker, is everything that I want to watch. And he's a guy, we talked about this last week. Like, there's just certain players on other teams that I like watching, which is why I watch a certain game. And so that Tennessee Pitt game lived up to the hype, in my opinion. So I think Tennessee's a big winner. I also think Appalachian State is a big winner.
Yeah, you think?
and it's as much as it is that they did upset Texas A&M, it's the fact that they're 1-1 and they're a team that I feel like should be 2-0 and had two great performances back. They won both, or they lost, but they played two different types of football in 2 weeks back to back. They showed that they can score as many points as anybody offensively playing against North Carolina. And you're like, oh, App State's defense probably isn't that good. And then they just beat Texas A&M playing a defensive game. So for them to have showed that they could play any type of football with anybody, I think that was a great win. Obviously, and then being Appalachian State and upsetting the number 6 team, whether you think they should have been number 6 or not, like, you just beat the number 6 team after really having a heartbreak loss down to the wire game in a game that we know, with knowing a Appalachian State fan, a game that they were looking forward to for years. That was a great game. So I feel like with Appalachian State, I feel like they're big winners because I watched last week Appalachian State play and probably be the greatest game we'll see this year. And then I watched them turn around and follow up with being on the losing end by beating the number 6 team. Like, it gets no better than that to me.
That was one of the
great. You should feel great being an Appalachian State fan, being 1-1, having arguably the greatest game we've seen played, and beating the number 6 team. I think they should feel great of any 1-1 team in the country.
I think that was the best point I heard about it, is that App State did it 2 different ways. That they out-toughed, they out everything. Texas A&M deserved the victory.
SEC team on top of that.
Oh yeah, bad look for the vaunted SEC, but it also goes to, like, one of your winners, Tennessee, and one of my big winners, Kentucky. Kentucky's ranked 20th. They're trying to create a consistent, NFL college football like strength, down there, and they're doing really well. I mean, it's got under Stoops, like they're solid, they're consistent. But that you go in the swamp, that means a lot to beat a team like that. I don't care. Again, we've talked about this till it's dead. Like, I don't care what Florida was ranked. I don't care if Florida was unranked. I don't care if they're ranked number 1. You're Kentucky. You're going into the swamp. I mean, one of the top probably 20 venues in college football as far as like history, look, everything. You go in there and you're playing against a team that had been hyped all week. We were loving Richardson. everything was in Florida's favor. Everybody was on Florida, and Kentucky goes in there and takes care of business like they always do. They just stay in the game. They're smart. They play well. They make big plays when they need them, and they got the interceptions. Kind of brought Richardson, back to the pack a little bit as far as like he's not quite. Yeah, he's not quite. Not that he's not good or anything, but they brought that back, and they got rid of. They moved ahead of another SEC team. So the same reason Tennessee should be happy. They got two of the teams above them in the SEC took a loss yesterday. So now, we know that the SEC team, the farther they go, they're going to have a higher chance at anything. So these Kentucky and Tennessee have left themselves in the discussion. So I thought it was a good win by Kentucky. And another one, BYU, great win by BYU. They have to win every game this year. This was one of the games on the calendar that was circled. They get we'll go ahead and say it, a number 9 Baylor, which I don't think there's any realm that we think that Baylor team that I saw was not number 9. But they had the number beside the name. BYU gets to claim it. Toughed out a good victory. I don't think they're a playoff caliber team, but again, we talk about the loss columns. All that matters. BYU won. Yeah, a good victory. And then I know we both want to talk about USC. I'll let you go on how we feel about the state of USC right now, because going into what they call it, the farm up there in Stanford, always a tough place to play. Good victory for USC.
I think USC is a playoff team. Like, I think and I know they played Rice and Stanford. I understand it through 2 weeks, but I think they're what we thought Utah was going to be this year. Like, they've looked good. The Lincoln Riley era is off to a good start, and they could have that hiccup loss. Teams like USC usually does. Like, they lose a game they shouldn't lose after getting every win that they need to get. They end up coughing one up, but
I don't know who that is on their schedule. I'm not saying they can't lose, but they're as of this moment, they're better than every team left.
They're better than every team left on their schedule, 100%. And it's the offense. The only thing I say I think they could be a playoff team. I think they could be their 4th team. I think it'd probably be Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and USC. Now I'd pick Utah on your show, but things change and whatever, and I'm willing to say I was wrong about Utah. Still think Utah has a chance of beating USC, but we'll see. But USC, the only concern is they look like a Lincoln Riley team. They are great, elite offensively, and they are lacking defensively. And so it will get you through the Pac-12 the same way that style of ball got you through the Big 12. But I don't know how much further it will get you after that. Even just a seat at the table in the playoffs for USC will be a victory in year 1 of Lincoln Riley. If USC is able to make the playoffs, that is a huge victory. I don't care if they get blown out by whoever they play. Them turning the program around, hiring Lincoln Riley, and being a playoff team in year 1 is a W of a season for USC. And when I look at them, I mean, Caleb Williams is amazing. Yeah. We knew he would be. He was linked back with Lincoln Riley. They both left together. So we knew he would be amazing. Jordan Addison is everything as advertised.
Yeah.
That man is a baller. Mario Williams is a great wide receiver. So when I look at USC, it's just funny that I'm like, they're built just like Oklahoma. Like, they're literally Oklahoma on the West Coast right now. Like,
and I think
Lincoln Riley team.
And Riley's proved that he can take that to the playoffs. I think USC should be very happy about, when we're going to talk about some of the losses, they should be very happy about getting a solid win against a good team when you've got other teams above you. I apologize. I had a window open and the commercial started, so I'll probably get thrown off of YouTube now. I think USC had a good win, and the combination of that, some big names above them, took a hit. That they got to be happy about where they're at right now.
I think they should probably jump to 5 or 6. To be honest, I mean, what, 3 top 10 teams lost?
Well, that's the thing. Like I'll just take 2 minutes and I'll get through this rant. So you're exactly right, but that's where USC should have been. I had them higher, like other people had them higher. I don't know why we have to go by these preseason rankings and make these teams that they got this arbitrary number. They've never played a game. Now we've got to work them up into the top 10. I know everybody says it'll work out, but I think that's bullshit that USC should be this good and ranked behind Notre Dame when the season started. Those teams aren't even on the same plane right now.
And we'll get into that.
But then ESPN gets to tout the matchups and blah, 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 blah. But this is my weekly rant. I'm tired of preseason polls. We can live without them. We can absolutely live without them. If you want to instead of preseason polls, like everybody loves the gambling and everything so much, and they want to endlessly talk about the betting lines. Leave the numbers off besides the name. And if you want to go to like the game, or you want to go to the Vegas odds and use that as championship, you'll get a much more accurate representation than
they had the fourth highest odds to
Yeah.
win the national championship.
Right, because Vegas is about getting it right. They do not care about the silly number that you got to earn. It's crazy. The top 25 preseason rankings this year, the APs, were about as bad as I can remember as far as just wrong.
It's even worse now. Like, it's looked even worse now.
Oh, it's not aging well at all.
And it's aging horribly. And I think I won't say everyone. I'd say a lot of people who are in this space of covering college football, and I think everybody's kind of done with preseason rankings. I think there shouldn't be one. I understand you do. Rankings is a thing in college football. And so it's tough to say, like, I think you should have to play your first game to earn your ranking, because if we just put everybody not ranked and we look at how everybody, but I
think you can't do that. The NFL does it. Everybody does it.
I think I'm with you of like maybe preseason rankings should bounce off of Vegas odds as opposed to just, oh yeah, we're going to come out here and be experts to say this team is this and this team is that.
Yeah, there is no way a sports writer in Boston has any fucking clue what the Texas Longhorns are going to be like this year. No, there's no way.
I'm okay with, because based on odds going into the season, I'm okay with Bama being 1, Ohio State being 2, Georgia being 3, and USC being 4. I would have been okay with that. Those are the 4 teams that you felt like had the highest championship odds, and Clemson being 5. Clemson was 5th. So I'm okay if you bounce it off of Vegas odds, like, hey, we do need a preseason rankings just because that's what college football is. But we're going to do it based off of basically Vegas odds. Who does Vegas think has the highest chances?
Yeah, or just do it sensibly.
Championship and do that 1 through 25. Like, I'm okay with that. I think
do it sensibly. I mean,
Vegas is more accurate than ESPN right now.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to worst losses here, because I knew I was going to get wound up about this. So I'll start with my worst losses, which ties into this. Notre Dame Fighting Irish losing to Marshall. I mean, this isn't a lucky ball bounce the right way. Marshall got some lucky kick. Marshall played as good as Notre Dame and beat them at their vaunted, cathedral of a football stadium that they think they have. So Notre Dame starts the season 0-2. Their quarterback looks lost. They don't look like a team that can score enough points to compete with anybody. They're out of the playoffs now because they insist on not having a championship game at the end of the year. So they don't have a conference championship game to make up for anything at the end of the year. Yeah, so even if they get into that silly argument about 2 lost teams that we hopefully won't have this year, but we might, they have no tiebreakers. They have a bad loss. They look bad against a good team week 1, so they don't have that. I would imagine that they've got several, I would imagine Clemson and USC will have their way with them also. But my point being, that's a bad loss. Notre Dame couldn't lose that game. Their season's over. I mean,
season is done basically before it started. I mean,
Marcus Freeman's 0-3 as their head coach. Like their head coach doesn't have a win. The country's laughing at them. They said they were overrated coming into the season. Now they've proved it. They should drop out of the top 25. If Notre Dame's in the top 25 tomorrow, I'm done with it.
I don't think an 0-2 team should be top 25.
No, especially one that's looked bad.
I don't care if you're 24, 25. Like, no, you should not.
Can't move the football on Ohio State or Marshall. So bad week by Notre Dame. I enjoyed it because I, just despise them. But it also feels good to be right. Like coming into the season, I'm like, this is the team that I thought they had. Do I think they lose to Marshall? Absolutely not. But do I think that was the level that we would get? Yeah. So bad week for Notre Dame. And again, that's the reason why there's nobody thought they should be 5 coming into the season. And now it takes forever to drop them down, as to where if that team came in at 25 when the season started, you'd believe it. So that's my whole point. So that was one of mine. And then I'll let you do one next. I don't want to step on your bad losses.
I say Florida. If
I knew you would.
There's money. Yeah, I was gonna, any shot I could take at the Gators, I'm gonna take it. But here's why I say Florida. You lost at home after having what we deemed a great win at home, right? Against Utah, against the number 7 team. And it goes to your point of the rankings. Like, we built Florida up to be this great team because
they them up way up
at home. They went from unranked to 12. Goes to talk about your rankings, right? But Florida did look good against Utah. I'm not taking away from them. But what I'm saying is, when Florida lost that game, how I sat back and said, the SEC is right where we thought it was. now. Like outside of, and we'll talk about A&M because they are definitely one of the worst losses, but I don't think it's as bad. I don't think A&M losing is as bad as everyone else is going to make it seem, because I've watched Appalachian State for 2 weeks, and that's not the team that you think. Like, don't think that Appalachian State should be discredited. But with Florida, I say it's a bad loss because now the SEC is in shape exactly where you thought it was. It's outside of the A&M loss, Tennessee won. People coming into the season thought Tennessee was better than Florida. They are. Kentucky won. People thought Kentucky beat Florida. People thought Kentucky was the second best team in the SEC East, behind Georgia. That's exactly what it was. Like, now we're sitting with Florida being 1-1.
Yeah, Florida based
them exactly how they were supposed to be coming into the season, but because they beat Utah, we put them as this number 12 team. We thought some people thought Anthony Richardson is a first round type of quarterback. I didn't. I know Stu didn't, with us covering those type of guys. And I know also like Walker, he wasn't sold on him being a first round guy, where people are like, he's our sleeper of winning a Heisman. And now you've seen them play and you're like, bro, I just think Florida is they got humbled, and they're exactly where
that was tough conference loss.
I thought it would be 0-2 right now because I thought Utah would beat Florida. Yeah. But even still, I think like they had a good win against Utah. Utah didn't play bad football. I think Florida just played great football that week. And I think, now they turn around and Kentucky's better than Florida. And that's exactly what we thought coming into the season, was Kentucky was the second best team in the SEC East.
And especially with Florida, this is one of those, just like we'll talk about A&M here in about 2 seconds. With what's left on their schedule, you couldn't take that loss. They're in deep doo-doo now. Like,
but Kentucky,
you got Georgia coming up, you got Tennessee coming up. Like, you're going to lose another game in your division. So you can't go to the SEC championship game. That eliminates you from the playoffs, and it does now. I don't want to hear the arguments. I know 2 years, I don't care. If you don't go to your conference championship game now, you're not going to the playoffs. It's just bottom line.
Let alone being Florida when you're on the same side as Georgia.
That's what I mean. You're done. You're
not
loss.
Georgia or Alabama. Like, at the end of the day, like, the argument against you would be, well, Bama did it and Ohio State did it, but Florida.
But I personally don't believe that it can happen anymore because of a lot of things going on. But
it's just the playoffs.
But it's definitely not happening.
You haven't been Bama or Ohio State.
Yeah, you're not getting that. Ohio State, you're not getting that situation where they get in over.
Yeah, you don't get benefit of the doubt. You haven't been,
especially with the extra loss. But you're like, you have to lose out of conference to get that benefit. Now you're screwed.
Yeah.
So let's talk about A&M real quick. Bad loss, and this isn't because they did lose to an inferior team. Like, I love Appalachian State. They should be a top 25 team. You said it. They played both sides of the ball great, but the fact of the matter is they're not as good as some teams left on their schedule. And so now they've taken that loss. They have dug themselves a hole that I don't know how they get out of. They have to run the table and get in the conference championship game and win it. I'm not saying they can't, but with what's left on their schedule, I had a loss for them on their schedule, not including Appalachian State. Now I think they're a 2-loss team. Again, now you're in an argument that I don't think you can win. And I think that's a tough loss for an A&M team that was coming into the season. This is finally the year that we're taking down Bama, and they haven't even made it to the SEC schedule yet. And they got handled. They didn't, again, not a fluke. They got handled by an App State team who is obviously one of the best coached teams, one of the hardest working teams in the country. And it was fun to watch, but they really put themselves behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, I think, and it's a bad loss for A&M, right? But I think if you just sit back, and obviously you and me have like different investments for Appalachian State because we've been paying attention with knowing Jeremy and things like that. So like, it makes you pay attention. And that's why I watched the North Carolina Appalachian State game last week. Was, the build up that Jeremy gave. I'm like, I got to watch it. And Ohio State's not playing at the same time. And so, like I said, for them to have lost one way, but showing that they could score points with anybody and then winning another way of 17-14, like, it's not it wasn't a high scoring game. They had to play defense in order to win that game. And they did that. I think that's an indictment on how good, I think Appalachian State is better than people think, as opposed to A&M is not as good as we thought, but you have to win that game. And
I think it's both.
Yeah, I agree with you, because we had these expectations because A&M has had top 5 recruiting classes for the past 2 to 3 years. So we look at the talent that they have. They're easily more talented than Appalachian State. And then I think it's also on Jimbo, right? Like when we're looking at, you said Appalachian State, and you said it, Appalachian State is well coached, like very great coach, a top coach. What is Jimbo? Like,
right.
Everybody can't be Nick Saban, where I think Nick Saban is a great coach as well, but everybody can't just bring all the talent in the world and win games. And Jimbo Fisher proved that, and that's kind of been the indictment on him since being in A&M. Is like, if they had lost to Tennessee or they had lost to Kentucky or whatever, I'd be like, okay, you shouldn't have lost that game, but who cares? Like, yeah, you got more talent, but who cares? Like, it's a conference game. We know conference games get chippy, and we know they're tough wins or tough losses regardless. But for you to go and lose to Appalachian State, when I feel like you put Appalachian State on the schedule for an easy W.
Yeah, let's keep that in mind that it was at home.
Yeah, like you're like, we're gonna pay Appalachian State $1 or $2 million, however much it costs to pay to play them.
We're going to steal credit for beating a good team that we think we should beat. Like, you're going to get a little more credit for beating an App State than you would for Arkansas State. And then, for them to come in and beat you.
Lose. Like, you went and lost, and then it's like, so if anybody's on a hot seat, I mean,
North Carolina just beat App State.
Yeah, so that makes it different because people don't value North Carolina like that. No, I think they're all
bad loss,
great, but it was a horrible loss because we know college football, and so we know the reasoning. Like, you put App State on there to bring App State in, pay them all the money to play an SEC school on national television to win. Like, that's why App State was on your schedule. Like, this is an easy win. We know how the second week, like, okay, we're gonna get these easy wins, and it's crazy because A&M didn't look that great in the first week, and they didn't play a good team, but to turn around and lose to App State, like you said, their season's done. Like, they don't have any respect. Like, I'm loving to see where A&M is ranked, if ranked at all. I mean, I think that loss should drop them out of the rankings, and it's cool. I understand the SEC is going to get respect. They'll probably be like 23 or something.
Yeah.
But it's not about losing to Appalachian State, because I think Appalachian State is a quality team, a good team. But it's the fact of, if I factor in everything of why you scheduled them, what you thought it was an easy win against Appalachian State, who has credit because Appalachian State has been a quality program since beating Michigan years ago. They've had that type of credit where it's like, it's not Arkansas State, it's Appalachian State. They got some players, they got some guys who have went to the NFL, so they have enough credit that beating them or blowing them out, or if you play them close and win, it's Appalachian State though. They're like better. They're the best of the small schools, so that's fine. Like, we get it. They're better than we think. But to lose behind that, and you're in the SEC, and people think you have an opportunity to make the playoffs, and people think you have an opportunity to beat Alabama and win the SEC,
bad loss.
Bad loss. You got to be unranked.
I got one more. I didn't watch the game. I found out about this just through the scores. I didn't even look into it, but just in a quick bad loss, Wisconsin. They can't lose that game to Washington State when you're supposed to be one of the better teams in the Big Ten, and it's another one of these things. You only scored 14 points against Washington State and took a loss. That's a tough loss for. It's another one of these teams like we're talking about with Florida and stuff that you're like. You're set up. They give you the benefit of the doubt. You're set up to have a good run, and then you haven't even made it to your conference schedule yet. I couldn't pretend to know what happened to the game, but it doesn't matter. I know that's just one that you can't lose if you're Wisconsin. So that was another one I had. And as far as like Texas, that's a tough loss, and just the fact that that's got to hurt. Like Texas,
I don't think it's a bad loss, though.
That's what I mean. But I'm just saying a bad loss as far as like
as a fan,
you'll never stop thinking about that. Like you had it. You played great. Like you should feel good about your team. I think they're better than I thought they were going to be. I think they're close to as good as I thought they were going to be. But that's just a bad loss. Those hang around for decades.
Yeah, like it's one of those like, and then you leave that game knowing that Quinn Ewers might be done for the season, and you also feel like if Ewers never got hurt, we probably win that game.
I think so.
And so that's where.
I think if he would cut his mullet, he would probably win more games. But I can't.
There's a bad loss. I
can't prove that.
Like I would take that if I was a Texas fan. I would take it like I hate this loss because we could have won that game, and if Quinn Ewers didn't get hurt, like there's what ifs in leaving a game with what ifs when you lose sucks. I know,
and that's a good loss because it won't hurt if Texas can run the table. They're in fine shape. That Alabama loss won't be factored in except for the loss column, which you've heard me say it a million times. They can't get that loss is going to go. It looks the same as everybody else's loss, and we all know it's not. But
if they're 11-1 Big 12 champs, like that season,
they're fine.
A success, and they could make
the
playoff.
But if it comes, but that's what I'm saying though. But it should. You should just almost be able to forget about a couple of those losses, but you can't. It's not the same as A&M's losses. What I'm getting at.
Oh yeah, 100%. Not even.
But you still got to rank behind. It's hard to get past it. But it was a good loss. But it was still, man, that's got to be tough for the fans.
It's tough as a fan. And then Notre Dame, obviously, I'm sure we were itching since you said A&M. You hit on A&M. I'm gonna hit on Notre Dame. Notre Dame losing is a horrible. I think that's the worst loss of the weekend because they start the season 0-2. Marcus Freeman starts his coaching career 0-3, and you lost to Marshall. Like, had you lost to, I'd respect it more losing to Vanderbilt. Like, at least you lost to a bottom feeder SEC team or Rutgers or Northwestern. Like, okay, you lost to a bottom feeder Big Ten team. You lost to Marshall. And again, just like A&M, it goes like Notre Dame scheduled Ohio State. Okay, big game. If we lose, we don't get discredited. Like, did Notre Dame really get discredited for losing Ohio State? I don't think so. And
not enough.
But I think it was because the expectation.
I think some people think Notre Dame won last week, but that's a different rant. Maybe I'll save that for the.
Well, yeah, but I think we're going to turn around, and the expectation was like, okay, even if we lose to Ohio State, that's fine. Like, we could be an 11-1 team. Our only losses to Ohio State, and we're good. They have some quality games left on the schedule, and you turn around and you start your season. Oh, you talk about somebody's season over. If A&M turn around and run the table and they were 11-1 and went to the SEC championship and won the SEC, like, as much as we say A&M season over, there's a way for them to get back. They have to run the table and win the SEC, but you're 0-2. You're done.
Buried.
There's no conference championship.
Their quarterback played bad. Their offense overall can't score.
They're done. You lost to the best of the best and the worst of the worst. Like, you have a loss against Ohio State, which tells you, like, okay, you probably don't deserve a seat at the table when you lost 21-10. And then you turn around and lost to Marshall. I don't care if every team goes 10-2. I don't care if Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, USC, if all of them went 10-2, Notre Dame is going to be the least deserving of a seat at the table to make the playoffs. Like, their season is over with. And now, like, I hate to see it because, he's a former Buckeye or whatever, but he also coaches at Notre Dame. So, he could kick rocks. But I hate to see the fact that a first-year head coach might be on the hot seat. And Marcus Freeman, like, the people are going to look at him like, okay, we'll give you your first year, but we also didn't think your first year was going to start 0-2. We was cool with being 1-1, beating Marshall and lost to Ohio State.
He had to be 1-1.
Notre Dame fan would be fine. But 0-2, like, bro, that puts you on, like, you're on the hot seat. I'm not saying you get fired this year. There's some coaches whose seats are hotter than others. But it puts you, like, all eyes are on Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman. Like, okay, bro, you got some of these recruits and this and that. Like,
they want all the attention. They got it now. I can tell you that. So
start 0-3, and we'll see what the conversations are in Notre Dame.
So just real quick, we're running just low on time here, but my biggest takeaway from the week was this again. After all the upsets and everything, there is no reasonable argument against playoff expansion now. We've proved that good coach teams can beat highly ranked teams. We've proved that there can be huge upsets. We've proved that a team like Texas is worthy of playing a team like Bama. There's absolutely no sensible argument for not expanding the playoffs. If we have that Bama Texas game in the playoffs, it's considered one of the greatest games, in the season. So that's my just biggest takeaway. Again, is it like, come on, like, if you don't want the expanded playoff now, then you just don't want it. Like, you don't have an argument for it. You just don't want it, and that's fine. But there's no argument for it anymore. Anybody can win anything.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Even when you told me that was like your biggest takeaway prior to doing the show, I'm like, he has the strongest point, and especially with you elaborating on your point, 100%. I think my biggest takeaway on top of that from week 2 is I'm not so sure. I think Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia are the 3 best teams in the country, but I don't think they're head over heels better than 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Oh, yeah. It's closer than we thought.
Whoever we determine is 4, 5, 6, or 7, and I don't care about the rankings. Guys like you and me, we understand college football, and the rankings don't necessarily mean nothing. We watch it, we see, but, like, is Alabama head over heels better than USC, because that would probably be my fourth team. Like if I was to draw a playoff after week 2, it's Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, and USC, and I really don't care what order. But I don't think it was a 3-team race going into the season. It wasn't even a conversation. Like nobody would argue it or whatever. But I think now, is 1, 2, and 3 so much better than 4 that we almost think it's a waste of ranking whoever is 4th at 4. No, I did think that when Clemson was 4, I was like, they put Clemson at 4 because you're going to put whoever at 4 and you don't care. I think those 3 teams. But after that, I think it's humbling for Alabama. We talked about it on Buckeyes Remix. I think it's humbling for Ohio State a little bit, even though we handle business and it's tough to jump up for those games.
But they're not perfect. They're not perfect.
And Georgia too. Yes, they won 33-0, but who did they play? They played a horrible team that the expectation, point spread, betting goes back to it. The expectation was they were supposed to win 66-0, not 33-0. And it's fine. I'm okay with Georgia not getting up for that Saturday game yesterday. That was horrible. But at the same time, I just think the top 3 teams may not be head over heels better than whoever one may consider the 4th best team. I would say USC right now. They're not head over heels better than USC. I think if Ohio State plays USC next week, I think that's a great game, and we might be watching one of the best games that we're going to watch all year. So as we get into week 5 and week 6, we'll see, we'll really see what 5, 6, or 7 teams separate themselves from the pack and have a chance of making the playoffs. But I think after week 2 and only reacting to week 2, basically week 1 and week 2, I would say I don't think the top 3 teams are head over heels better than whatever we say are 4, 5, 6, and 7.
And essentially we're saying the same thing, that there's more good teams than just 3. The argument's been all year nobody deserves a shot. No, don't get blasted. I think we found out that Alabama, Texas A&M, Ohio State played close last week against no, they're not going to blow out these other playoff teams. So I think we're on the same page. So real quick, before we get out of here, what game are you watching next week?
Probably BYU Oregon is definitely one that I'm looking at. I know BYU is 2-0. They beat Baylor. They beat a top 10 team. How do you follow it up? Because Florida beat a top 10 team, didn't follow it up, and they followed it up with a loss. So I'm looking at BYU. Walker is the reason why I'm even looking at BYU really in the first place. But that BYU-Oregon game, I think, could be tricky. As much as, Oregon got blown out by Georgia, but at the same time, they're 1-1. They're still a good team. They're not great. They're not in the playoff conversation, in my opinion, but I think they could beat them. And then another game is probably Miami and Texas A&M. I think with A&M losing, how do you bounce back off a disappointing loss?
And they have to look good.
Yeah. How do you bounce back against a disappointing loss against Appalachian State? And then Miami, how do you bounce back against a slow start versus Southern Miss? You went into halftime up 10-7. We kind of deemed Miami outside of Clemson, they're the team that could win the ACC, and then you're up 10-7 at halftime. Mario Cristobal, seen with recruiting and everything, he was supposed to turn the program around, and it looked like it week 1, but how do you bounce back? I think that's a matchup of 2 teams. A&M shouldn't be ranked, but they probably will be. So that's probably a matchup of 2 ranked
teams. They're going to be ranked for they need a game to advertise next week.
And so they're going to be ranked. And that's going to be a ranked game. That was supposed to be a huge game. We expected,
it's a huge game now. I mean,
but we expected it to be 2 teams that are 2-0 and ranked in the team, a top 10 team versus a lower tier, 12, 13 in Miami. And so Miami could jump close to the top 10. They could be 11 and 12 or 11 or 12, and A&M might be in the high teens or low 20s. But I'm just looking at the game. I think it's a bounce back game for both teams. I think it's going to be very telling on how we're going to view both teams from here on out.
I'm basically looking at kind of the teams that have all the momentum now, the top, we'll say, 6 or 7 teams. This isn't a tough schedule this week. It's the week before most conference schedules are really kicked in. How they handle business before the conference schedules, how does, the Ohio States, the Oklahomas, the USCs, how do they handle the trips, the stumbling blocks in the way next week and take momentum into the season. Then after week 4, I'll redo the playoff rankings and stuff. Hopefully I can get Mo one for that. So, hey, thanks for being on, man. This was a great show. I always love doing this after a great week of college football. And that was a fantastic week of college football. So, again, everybody subscribe to Off the Ball Network. go subscribe, listen, like, review everything that Mo's doing at Up in Flames. I'm Jeff Needs Sports. That was college football week 2. Thanks for being here, Mo. Thanks for being here. And we're out.